Hello, this is Zahirul. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Amanda Bannet. She's the director of Voice of America, VOA, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist and author. Amanda Bannet has been chosen as the director of the Voice of America, the U.S. government's largest international broadcaster, in March 2016. Bannet served as the executive editor of Bloomberg News, where she created and ran a global team of investigative reporters and editors until 2013. Previously, she was editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. She also spent 2 decades as an editor and reporter for Wall Street Journal, where she and her colleagues shared a Pulitzer Prize for national reporting on how public health officials misrepresented the AIDS epidemic in order to secure more public funding and financial support. She received the Lifetime Achievement Award on April 26 at the 5th Annual Washington Women in Journalism Awards. She is visiting now Bangladesh, and we welcome her on Frankly Speaking.
Good.
Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. I think this is your first visit to Bangladesh?
It is my first visit to Bangladesh.
So what prompted you to take this visit?
Well, first off, our Bangla service of Voice of America is a very long-standing, very old service and very important to Voice of America, so I wanted to see our operations here. That's the first thing. But the second thing is we're very interested in looking at how Voice of America can extend its operations to better serve refugee communities.
Okay.
And so my team and I went down and spent some time in the camp at Cox's Bazar, where the Rohingyas are now staying. So we spent time looking at their information needs.
So what is your field experience there after visiting the plight and misery of the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh?
Well, particularly in terms of information, everyone knows that refugees need food, they need shelter, they need medical care. But in addition, refugees also need information, and I was very surprised to learn, I had known how isolated they were, but how very isolated they are from information and how hungry they are for information. They're interested in information about the world, they're interested in information about their home country, and so we think that for many international broadcasters there's a great deal of opportunity to be able to serve that population better.
So we know that not only Bangladesh, you have operation in more than 85 countries and more than 45 languages. You're producing content and broadcasting as a news organization. So how do you manage this large and huge operation all over the world?
Well, you know, it's a big job, but we also have people like our Bangla service chief, Rukia Haidar, who in each of our services we have someone who is a leader, an experienced leader that helps us guide that content, and I depend very heavily on those people to help us.
What are the new plans you have related to Bangladesh or related to Bangla service?
Well, we're always looking for ways to make our content more relevant to people, and also around the world the challenge of getting into more digital broadcasting, both for mobile phones and for other ways of doing it, because that's the way younger people are consuming news. That's a big goal of ours throughout Voice of America, including the Bangla services, to help us improve our digital broadcasting.
Is there any plan to open up a new office in Bangladesh? Not
right this second, but you never can tell.
Okay, so we know that after when you took over as the director of Voice of America, I saw on the internet that you said that you are so fortunate to be the director of Voice of America during a busy and fascinating time. What did you mean by busy and fascinating time, particularly this time?
Well, you know, around the world you're finding that the information space is becoming much more difficult for journalists around the world, everywhere. And so Voice of America, which has historically and today focuses on trying to give really reliable, truthful, fact-based information, it's a bigger opportunity for us and actually a bigger responsibility, because you find that the media are becoming increasingly polarized around the world. I think the same thing is true here, that people are being polarized, and we believe that people need really factual, believable information that shows and analyzes both sides objectively. And that's what we try and do. And we think the opportunity and the need is much greater than it's ever been before.
But when you talk about looking at things objectively, accurately, precisely, the amount of challenges we are facing in terms of journalism, how do you see the challenges all over the world?
Well, it's of course extremely challenging because being objective is a lot of work, and I think that's part of the issue, is that we really need to focus on doing the work to actually go and look for the facts. Don't just pass things on or take one position or another position and one opinion or another opinion. People depend on us to be here in the country, to do the reporting, to do the facts, to be able to present people what the reality is. It's hard work, and it's getting to be harder work everywhere in the world.
No denying to that, but if we talk about in particular the Rohingya issue, say for example that you are visiting from representing Voice of America, but somehow or other do you think that this is a crisis which is not being looked at with due importance? Is that a neglected crisis across the world?
Absolutely. We think that for the size of the crisis, it's not getting the international attention it should be getting. And we came out not just with me looking to see how we can improve our broadcasts, we also brought a team of journalists to do reporting for us to use on our broadcasts, not just into Bangladesh, but around the world. So we find that for a crisis this size, it's really getting very little coverage.
So, I mean, the amount of coverage, amount of attention from the international community, in your view, is that adequate so far, what you have seen?
We think there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of need to increase that coverage, that it is not sufficient. Particularly, I think we noticed that some of the issues involving the local community and the effect of this on the environment in Bangladesh, the effect of it on the people, of their jobs, their livelihoods. We're not giving adequate attention to reporting those issues.
But through reporting, how does it help actually, in your view, if the international community comes down and the media houses come down and they focus on the crisis, how it will help us to resolve the crisis or standing by the people in distress?
You have to believe, as I do, that objective reporting and news is absolutely crucial to the functioning of a good government and a good civilization. So we believe that for society's sake, it's not even a question of asking how this reporting can help. This is an absolute necessity. You can't function without it. So we're thinking that we're providing a basic information for the government to learn, for the people to learn, for the NGOs to learn, for people not just in Bangladesh, but in the United States and in the other countries that we serve, to learn about this, because it helps focus attention and hopefully will help people arrive at solutions.
But media, in different avenues, being criticized so bitterly for their role in many arenas. But why is that? Because the standard of media should be objective, accurate reporting, but somehow it's not that much regarded as being objective or accurate in all over the world. They are being bitterly criticized.
Absolutely, and that strikes me as a huge tragedy, because we come from a country where we believe that an objective media is the foundation of a democracy, that you can't have a democracy without an objective, reliable media. And so the fact that the journalists around the world are increasingly either falling down on the job or being prevented from doing their job, both sides, is a huge tragedy, and we feel that that gives us even more responsibility to do our job correctly. Because as you correctly point out, we are a U.S. government-funded news organization, but we're also legally separate from the United States government. Okay. We operate completely independently from it, which gives us a tremendous amount of credibility.
Okay. Amanda Bannet, we know that Voice of America programs are produced and broadcast in English and many other languages through radio, satellite television, and the internet. How do you manage? I mean, I ask you about, but it's a huge task and maintaining objectivity. And you mentioned about that you are separate, though it is an organ of the U.S. government, but you are separated editorial-wise, the policy-wise, you are separated from that organization. How did you maintain that sort of neutrality.
Yes, and the key is, while we're funded by the U.S. government, we're not an organ of the U.S. government. We are funded, but we have two things. One is that we have a legal separation. It's separate in law from editorial interference by any part of the government. And also, we have a very strong culture within Voice of America that has a very proud journalistic tradition that says we are not going to favor one side or another. We're not going to criticize unduly one side or another. We're going to present both sides fairly, and we are going to use our own editorial judgment to decide what is factual and what we need to give to our viewers.
Do you face any consequences for criticizing the U.S. government?
Well, if we face any consequences, it's, you know, perhaps some criticism, but that is irrelevant to us. We try to make sure that if there's criticism, perhaps it might be criticism we deserve. If we've made errors, then if they criticize us for errors, then we correct those errors. But if it's criticism because simply they just don't like the point of view, well, that's part of the independence of a press, that you are able to report fairly and objectively in spite of criticism.
Freedom of press, independence of press and media is a big key question nowadays across the world. I mean, how, in your view, what is the real scenario in terms of freedom of media?
It's a very difficult scenario around the world, and people are facing, you know, increasing pressure, not just from government, but also from various independent sources. We are finding that increasingly our journalists are under threat. We're having to be very careful about watching for our journalistic safety, and it's not just us, it's any organizations that are reporting around the world. So yes, it's an increasingly difficult task.
But what is your suggestions to, to broadcast an accurate, objective, balanced, comprehensive news and information to the international audience? What are the most important critical things to maintain?
Well, the most important critical things to maintain is, first off, as you pointed out, not to be afraid to put out these objective information. So that's the first thing. But second, as I said earlier, this is a lot of work. It's not easy to take two different points of view, to look at what the facts are underneath those points of view and analyze them and put them out. There's increasingly, with electronic media, with the digital media, it's very fast. It depends sometimes on rumor, it depends on just kind of quick thinking or opinion. That, to my mind, is not journalism. So journalism involves work, it involves research, it involves doing really good reporting, and my job, I hope, is to help us maintain those standards.
But when you pursue accurate, objective, balanced, comprehensive journalism, and if you face any sort of challenge or any risk, it varies, but globally, what is the standard in terms of protection? Are you convinced or satisfied with the state of protection the journalism or the journalist community is receiving all across the world?
No, I don't think I can ever be satisfied with the state of protection of journalists, because these are the people who are on the ground facing risks every day. They're facing risks to themselves, or facing risks to their families, to their jobs, and so I think we have a responsibility to do everything we can to protect them in doing this really important work.
Yeah. But let us come back to our affiliation with many organizations, including in Bangladesh. We have a long partnership with Voice of America. NTV, first we have an agreement in 2005, and since then we have been maintaining a partnership. How do you look at your sister affiliates who have been partnered with you and you are producing contents for them? Is there any particular focus or any particular objectives to achieve in the coming days?
Well, our affiliates like you, and we have, you're right, a long-standing affiliation with your station, they're absolutely critical to us, because in many parts of the world, this is the way the people of the country see and hear the work that we do, is through partnerships with affiliates like you. So we respect and cooperate with you, and we really appreciate the respect and cooperation you give to us.
The Voice of America broadcasts by satellite and FM, AM and shortwave radio frequencies. Do you have any plan to broadcast in medium wave, in particular in Bangladesh?
Not right this second, but we also broadcast digitally around the world, and that is an increasing focus of our attention, is to get better in that space, because that's where the younger generations are beginning to get their news and information. So we're focusing a lot of our attention there.
Why social media is increasingly getting more importance around the world?
Well, where did you get your news and information today? Where did I get my news and information today? I looked at my cell phone. And increasingly, it's not just the younger generation that's getting their news and information that way. It's portable, it's easy, it's with us every day. Yeah. And so this is increasingly the way we're seeing things. And we're moving around, and to sit in a television or a radio, you have to be in one place. We're increasingly mobile, and our communication is mobile too.
So I know I mentioned that you were a Pulitzer Award-winning journalist. As an investigative journalist, you have a long career, and you have own way to look at the journalism challenges and opportunities for the journalist community. How do you, describe about the major, key, pivotal challenges for the journalists right now across the world?
The pivotal challenges for journalists around the world right now is the fact that the media climate and in fact the social climate around the world is increasingly polarized, and I believe our job is to try and maintain an objective stance and not become polarized on one side or the other. There's economic challenges from news media organizations. There are challenges with the shrinking of the free media space around the world. And also, and perhaps most important, there are the increasing threats to our journalists around the world, to their safety. And this is critically important because we cannot get the news and information without the actions of these brave men and women, and they deserve our protection and our attention.
How to get over the shrinking media space all across the world?
Well, one thing that we find at the Voice of America is that part of what is very important to us is the culture that we have of maintaining independence. And I know that's very difficult in places where laws and businesses and all kinds of other forces are pressing against them. But I find that the media culture and avoiding self-censorship and trying to be as neutral and objective and as courageous as possible and being neutral about the news is a very important factor. It's one of the things that we can do.
The countries like United States of America, the amount of protection of the journalist community you have in your own country, do you think that is relevant to other countries? What do your experience says?
Well, luckily, while journalists all over the world, including the United States, face all types of pressures, we have a significant amount of legal protections. We have a significant amount of cultural protections. Our journalistic organizations are independent of the government. They're owned independently. And the United States government is lucky to have created our government-funded broadcaster and yet very wisely created it legally independent. So we have an independence. We also have a culture of safety, and that's one of the reasons why we feel a great deal of responsibility to help our colleagues around the world who perhaps are operating not in a safe environment as we are.
You were awarded, I mentioned that Pulitzer Prize along with your colleagues, and recently you were awarded for your lifetime as a lifetime achievement by the Washington Women in Journalism. So after a long career in journalism, what suggestions, what message you have for the media practitioner in the countries like Bangladesh? Well,
I think for me, journalism is a very, very honorable profession. And for any young practitioner who's coming into this field, I really hope they take the time to think seriously about the career that they're embarking on, to try and get as much training as possible, to try and be as serious as possible, and not to fall prey to thinking that tweeting and passing on and retweeting and passing on information is journalism. It's not. Journalism is getting information, first-hand information, and bringing it to the people in a way that they can believe. It's work, and it's worth it for the young professionals to learn their craft as best as they possibly can.
What type of challenges the print or the electronic media are facing during the digital era?
Well, obviously, in our country, perhaps even more than in yours, the print media is facing tremendous challenges. The print media's audience is going down, the circulation is going down, the advertising that supports the endeavor is going down, and it's being everything is being moved to the electronic media, which is why we're increasingly focusing on the digital media as part of our strategy.
So your next vision as a director of Voice of America, what you are looking at, what you are trying to achieve?
Well, we know
this is a vital organization in the United States of organization.
Yes, and there's two things I care a great deal about. One is that it's part of the responsibility of Voice of America to tell America's story to the world. And America's story to the world is not just our politics and our foreign policy. It's also the story of our people. It's the story of our religious organizations. It's the story of technology, entrepreneurship, education, medical advances. It's a rich and diverse story that we have a responsibility to tell to the world. In addition, our mission from the very foundation, we were founded during World War II, and our mission was to bring news and information to people who were isolated from the rest of the world. And we are looking at the situation of refugees in camps around the world and seeing that of all the people in the world, they're perhaps the most isolated from information, and therefore we think we have a responsibility to consider how we can improve our service to those communities.
As a journalist, as a news person, what is your take on about the crisis? Do you expect that the amount or degree of difficulties the millions of people are facing in the Rohingya camps, would they see any immediate solution of the crisis?
I think we were very frightened and compassionate for these refugees who are right now facing serious challenges with the weather, and we're hoping that that is going to be addressed in some way that will help protect people's lives and health. And we really hope that some solution comes that will be able to get these people the lives that they want and deserve, as all human beings do around the world.
Thank you, Amanda Bannet, for joining me on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you
on
so
our
much.
15th anniversary.
Thank you. Happy anniversary, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a privilege, and
Thank you.
we are very delighted to have you on this very special day. Dear viewers, thank you so much for watching this conversation with Amanda Bannet, Director of Voice of America, and she's a Pulitzer Prize winning and investigative journalist from the United States of America. And we thank you indeed for watching this program. We invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care and goodbye.